Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Middle East Centre event. My name is Robert Lowe, and I'm Deputy Director of the Middle East Centre. And it's a great pleasure to welcome our colleagues today who are involved on the project Bridging Identities, the Cultural Odyssey of Kurdistani Jews. So we have an hour today. We're just under an hour now, thanks to me. We'll stop the event at 5. We will have presentations from our speakers, and then there'll be time for questions from you out there in the audience afterwards. If you'd like to ask a question, please do so through the Q&A box, which is in the toolbar at the bottom. Do not use the chat box. We'll just be monitoring the Q&A box for questions. Please note the event is going to be recorded as well. This is the first in the Kurdish study series of events that we run at the Odyssey Middle East Centre this year. There will be others. Look out for those coming. And we have a conference on Kurdish studies, which will be running in June. So if you're not already involved or have submitted a paper, please look out for registration. That is live and all are very welcome to attend. Right, let's get on with intros. I'll just briefly introduce our 4 speakers and then hand over to them. So we are delighted to welcome Bahar Baser, who's Professor in Politics and International Relations at Durham University. She has researched extensively on diaspora engagement and peace processes, post-conflict reconstruction and state building in the Global South. And she also edits a Kurdish study series published by Lexington Books. Welcome to Duygu Atlas, who is a historian and documentary maker and completed her doctoral studies at Tel Aviv University in 2019 with a dissertation on Turkey's Jewish minority between Turkey and Israel. And her research centers on Kurdish and Jewish minorities in Turkey and more recently on Kurdistani Jews in Israel. Then we have Mesut Alp, who's a photographer and documentary maker and a graduate of Ege University. He's participated in numerous archaeological excavations across Anatolia and northern Mesopotamia, worked at the Mardin Museum and served as a lecturer at Mardin Artuklu University. And welcome also to Moayed Asaf, who's a Kurdish academic and photographer, originally from Iraqi Kurdistan. And since 2015, Moayed has instigated a series of photography projects in France, working with displaced people and children in care, helping them express their feelings and reflections on their daily lives and experiences of migration. Welcome, everybody. It's lovely to have you here for this seminar. Thank you so much. Bahar, I imagine you would like to go first. I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rob, and thank you so much for the invitation. We are very happy to be here today. So I'll just briefly give you a background about the project and then leave the floor to my colleagues to elaborate on the main topic. So my part is really short, but I'm happy to take questions at the end. So this project was an individual project in the beginning. I was following the independence referendum in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, and I saw more and more news appearing in different news outlets talking about a Kurdish diaspora in Israel supporting Kurdish self-determination projects. And at that time, I have been working on the Kurdish diaspora for almost 2 decades now, and I've mostly focused on Kurdish diaspora groups in Europe. So for me, it was so interesting to see that people were referring to the Kurdistani Jews in Israel as a diaspora. So I received a pilot project grant from the CBRL, and I embarked on this journey to find out whether the Kurdish diaspora, quote unquote, in Israel had an impact on Kurdish politics or Israeli politics in general, Israeli foreign policy. And when I went there, I met Duygu, and my life has changed, and I found another academic soulmate there. But more interestingly, I was there to look for, answers to questions that are related to high politics, Kurdish lobbying, Kurdish leverage on foreign policy decisions, etc. But I found something else when I went to the field. I met so many people with really interesting stories. I found out that a project that is related to the Kurdistani Jews in Israel has more to do with memory studies or heritage rather than high politics, if you will, because there were so many stories that were not covered, at least by scholars from the West, or there were many books in Hebrew, maybe in Kurdish, but not published in English. So there was much to cover there. I found, for example, how cultural trauma can be turned into an asset for a community which suffered a lot for centuries, especially because of forced migration experience, etc. But at the same time, I saw how resilient they became and how traumas of the past were inherited by consequent generations and turned into different identity markers. So basically, my pilot project showed me not everything is about high politics, and our pilot projects might lead to surprising outcomes. And I came back from the field thinking that these stories need to be told. So Duygu and I then penned another project proposal, and this time we also included artists like photographers, documentary makers like Mesut, and we had another colleague, Güliz, with us. And the second project was again funded by the CBRL, and this time we interviewed a lot of people in different parts of Israel, chasing stories after stories. And in the end, we prepared a photo exhibition. I'll talk about it in a minute, but also I want to emphasize that we had an academic interest. We are coming from different fields. So Duygu is an historian, and we also have different backgrounds. So I'm Turkish. Duygu is Turkish, but she has been living in Israel for a long time. Mesut and Muayed are Kurds, but from different parts of Kurdistan, and our approaches to the field was really different. Our insider, outsider roles were different. So it was an excellent team, and I think our work and our perceptions really complemented each other. And we were so happy that we met Muayed Asaf in the middle of our journey, whose work is fantastic because his work also covers the heritage that this community has left in Kurdistan, and he will talk about that today as well. So in the end, we had an exhibition, and Nadine will share the link in the chat box, and it's a permanent exhibition, as far as we know, the first and maybe only online exhibition about this community, and it is displayed by the Oriental Museum in Durham. It's a permanent one. And you can go and visit this from the website. We'll also have a book, and our on-site exhibition took place at the Kurdish Institute in Paris in February 2024. Our initial idea was to have it in Duhok, but apparently it just did not happen in the end because of high politics, let's put it that way. So we really believe that these stories need to be told. And we wish that we conducted this research and we had the chance to promote this research in better times in the Middle East. But do they ever come to the Middle East? We just don't want to wait any longer. We want to share our preliminary findings because we were just chatting with Wyatt this morning, and we are losing witnesses of this forced migration from Iraq to Israel, and it will be a shame for history, as Moayed said, if we don't talk about what we know now. So I leave the floor to my colleagues now. Duygu will go next, and they will give you more information about the historical background, our fieldwork, and then Moayed will present his PowerPoint. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation, Robert. I'm delighted to be here and share our work. I will give all of you a brief historical background as fast as I can, so we are all on the same page about whom we are talking about today. So if we look at the Kurdistani Jews, until the mid-17th century, we have them everywhere in what we call Kurdistan today. From Diyarbakir to Mardin, from Urfa to Nusaybin, then we go over to Lake Van, then we go down to what is now Syria, to Kamishli, and then we can go back to Lake Urmia in Iran. But the highest concentration of Kurdistani Jews were present in what we call today Iraqi Kurdistan. In the provinces of Mosul, Arbil, Zakho, Ahmadiyya, Accra, Dohuk, Süleymaniye, Kirkuk, and so on. And these communities, these Kurdistani Jewish communities, spoke various dialects of what we call Neo-Aramaic, which is the modern descendant of the ancient Aramaic language, which has a long history dating back to the first millennium BCE. And if you talk to the Kurdistani Jews today, how do they trace their history? They trace their history back to a watershed biblical event, which is the Assyrian conquest of the northern kingdom of Israel in the 8th century BCE. And one of the places, Assyrians did that a lot. They basically deported the people they have conquered over to all these different places. And one of the places that the Assyrians deported the Israelites back then was what we call now Kurdistan. But what do we know about this early history of Kurdistani Jews? Unfortunately, not much. As Mordechai Zakan pointed out once, it is clouded in mystery, except for a few travelers' accounts in the 10th and 11th centuries and 12th centuries. We have basically no information. But even the tiny glimpses that we have bring to light very interesting characters. For instance, the first female rabbi, Asnat Barzani, or false messiahs like David al-Roy. So it is a very interesting story, but unfortunately, like I said, we don't have much information about that. But if we talk about life in Kurdistan, what was the legal standing of Kurdistani Jews, this tiny Jewish community in Kurdistan? They lived in mostly rural areas under the mandate of Kurdish tribes and received protection from Kurdish tribal leaders that we call Ah. But their treatment was dictated, of course, by Islamic principles. They were considered part of al-Dhimma, in other words, protected people, which in itself basically reflects a form of hierarchy where Muslims hold privileged status. But we know that they had economic freedom. We know from certain accounts that they were able to visit their religious places, religious holy sites, perform their religious practices regularly. It had much to do with where these Jewish communities lived. It depended on the rural tribal leader at the time, and if they lived in larger cities or in rural areas. So it had a combination of good and bad. It depended on much where they lived. Which brings me today, maybe like one of you will ask me a question about this, how the life in Kurdistan, like this nostalgia, the life in Kurdistan is remembered currently now by the descendants of these people. And we'll talk about that because there are two schools of thought on this issue. And now let's talk about immigration to what these Jewish communities call Eretz Israel, the land of Israel in religious terms, and Palestine. The immigration to Eretz Israel, Palestine, started as trickles in the early 1800s, which formed basically the core areas where the later immigration populations merged into later on. We have some more immigration during First World War because the security situation became very precarious for these tiny religious communities, so they started immigrating to Eretz Israel, Palestine. But by 1930, we see that in these trickles, a lot of the Jewish community made their way to Israel, Palestine. But this had, at the time, much more to do with religious fervor, the religious belief, than Zionist fervor, one must say. Even today, when you talk to these people, like many Jews, in every holiday and every celebration that they said, Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. So it was kind of like this religious promise, which led them to this immigration. But when we come to the 1930s and the rise of fascism in Europe and the even more precarious situation that these communities find themselves in, we see that this leads to kind of like Nazi-like laws with the rise of Rashid al-Gailani in Iraq, and his removal, which leads eventually, his removal by the British, which eventually leads to Farhud, this pogrom against the Jewish community in Baghdad and around. The reports indicate at least 180 Jews were killed then. Some estimates were higher, but this was a watershed event for the Kurdish Jewish community. But what basically made the biggest influence on their immigration was the 1947 partition plan, and the subsequent establishment of the State of Israel. The Iraqi government then passed a series of laws which made life very difficult for these Jewish communities. They were banned from certain professions, and eventually they were allowed to immigrate on condition that they revoke their Iraqi citizenship. They were not able to sell any of their belongings. They had to leave everything behind in an airlift operation in 1951 and 52, which we call Ezra and Nechemia operation. They were airlifted to Israel, something around 120,000 Iraqi Jews. They made their way to Israel, and they were settled in mostly around Jerusalem, in Jerusalem and around Jerusalem, and in border areas in the north along the Lebanese border, and also in the south along the border with Gaza. I don't want to take much more time, and I will leave it here. And about remembrance and memory, maybe we'll get into it during Q&A. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dugan. That was a wonderful, quick overview, beautifully presented and fascinating. Who's going next? Mesut? Yep, please. Thank you.
Again, as my friend say that, thank you for the invitation, and I'm glad to be here. Actually, as Duygu mentioned, it's our fieldwork is focused around Jerusalem and around Jerusalem. And first time when I visit Israel, we visit the north border of Israel with Lebanon, and we first time met with some Kurdish families. But as a Kurdish from northern Kurdistan, from Mardin, I have never imagined that one day I'm gonna go to Israel and working with Kurdish Jewish people, because we grow up with their stories. Nusaybin or Nisibis in history is so important and famous city for Jewish history also, and we grow up with their stories, but we never saw them in formal history in our book, or when you invite some people from outside of our country to visit Mardin or Nusaybin, you didn't say or see anything about Jewish people. But when I went there, I saw how deeply we are connected with that culture and that religion. As a Kurdish people, when I start working with my friend Bahar, Duygu, and Güliz, first time I saw people over 60 or 70, they are more strongly, they are connected with Kurdistan region or Kurdistan country as a homeland. But after I deeply searching about that, I saw the connection with Kurdistan like a homeland or dreamland of their ancestor, but they are feeling at home in Israel. They are feeling they have a country, because no Kurdish people from four parts of Kurdistan, from Kurdistan, Irani Kurdistan, Iraqi Kurdistan, Turkey Kurdistan, or Syria Kurdistan, we never have a freedom Kurdistan in our life, in the history. For that, it's so difficult for us to feeling to be or a part of somewhere. But I saw that Kurdish Jewish or Kurdistani Jewish in Israel, they feeling they are in their country, and they can present themselves as a Kurdish people more than anywhere in the world in Israel. But unfortunately, when we start to interview with them, we just find one or two people can't speak fluently in Kurdish. They really losing their mother language or one of their mother language, as Duygu mentioned that they are speaking no Aramic language also as their mother language, but at the same time they're using Kurdish also. But unfortunately, I saw the new generation have no connection with Kurdish identity or Kurdistan. For example, last one when we're talking with Joseph, and we eat together, so delicious food. I think my friends will remember that also. When they talk about Mullah Mustafa Barzani, they feel like talking about like a hero, or a man from mythology or something like that. They have deeply respect to him. But I'm sure if I talking with their grandchildren or their children, they have no idea about Mustafa Barzani or Kurdish identity in Iraq. One of our interviews showed me that the connection with Kurdistan start to be with Turkish series from TV. If they're watching Turkish series and they are talking about Istanbul, it means they are talking about Kurdistan also. And we find out how Kurdistan mean for them. But except everything, most interesting one for me as a Kurdish left-wing ideologist Kurdish, I saw first time in my life, even in diaspora in Europe or Irani Kurdistan, Iraqi, Northern Turkey Kurdistan, or Rojava, the most Kurdish people stand in left-wing ideology. But in Israel, it's so interesting. Most of them stay in the right-wing ideology and they support that politician. It was interesting for me. I think they are the one. They are so unique for that reason also. And what I can say about them, and I find out that they have small community and they believe that they have to be a part of that country, and they know how importance of being in Israel and existence of Israel for them also. And because of that, being in Israeli and Jewish is more important than to being a Kurdish for them. I can understand this one also. It was so interesting for me. First time I saw someone from Kurdistan, they identified themselves something more than to being a Kurdish. I think we are, I have to stop here. If we have some question after that, we can keep going, and I give stage to Moed.
So I just want to, before I start, Robert, I thanks Robert and the university and Uyghur and everyone to give me this privilege to speak here and coming and speak a little bit about my projects and my why I'm working about this project. First, I am not academic. I am autodidact. So it's mean my project, but finally had been interested by the academicians and the university. I used to work about it. It's all my work about my childhood memories. The reasons why the absence of these peoples. I born in a neighborhood in Kurdistan, Erbil is named Hayy al-Arab, the neighborhood of Arabs. But in the fact, it was just living by the Jews when they lived it. When I think my memory of childhood, it was like when we was 5 years old, we traveled from there and we go far away. But these questions I ask all the time: who was the people who was living in these houses? We was child, we was playing, trying to find some things, but in the fact, after these questions, when I little bit younger and asked the questions for around of me, it was like a taboo. It's forbidden speaking about the Jewish. In this time, it was the regime of Saddam. So I went to the library of Erbil just to find something about the history of these peoples, the Jewish peoples. We didn't have nothing. We just have just a simple one book whose name is My Camp, and it's the bestseller. So I take it, I read it, I finish it. When I traveled in Europe after 20 years later, this question was for me so much important. Who was this people living? What we transmit for the new generations after the region of Kurdistan, it was to have a little bit his freedom, not like in the past. So my nephew, he should read when a teacher give him a homework like history about the Jewish peoples who was living here. What he would go to read? He should go. The only source we have it in the library there. It's my camp. It's not fair for them. So the first, it was for my nation and my family to know who was really these peoples they start, who was living there. Sometimes in Kurdistan, we know we need a permissions. So this picture start when I start working about this project. It was in 2012 or something like that. Every time when I was traveling in Kurdistan, I was working because I am translator official from the court. So I was visiting Kurdistan for working a lot of times. So every time, so I started working about my project. Sometimes we don't need a permission. So this is when we don't need a permissions, we jump like that. And this pictures is the house of Araba. He was traveled, was go to Israel, but he left a daughter. The daughter, she was in love with a Kurdish Muslim man, and she stayed. So this is what we see. This neighborhood, abandoned it, but this picture, I love it so much because we can show the past and we can show actually the right now, all this trash, and the future is the tree. All, like you see, abandoned it, and there was the people before in the past who was taken from the Jewish people, giving for the peoples by the government. They still are now like that. All the time, the people of Erbil, when I traveled for a few years, when I take pictures, they ask me when they come back. I don't know. This is the questions of the people. Sometimes they say where they come back. And the second part of my projects, it was individual projects, finding a witness in Kurdistan, Kurdish witness, Muslim who had really a memory with the Jewish peoples. Not so it was not so much easy, and actually I found in Kurdistan we have a peoples who represent the Jewish community in Kurdistan officially. I had his number. I go saw him. This is one my old man, Ibrahim. He died. He born in 1918. This old man, he speak for 47 minutes in the middle of Ramadan. And he gave me all the names of the family Jewish people who was living in Kurdistan before they traveled, name by name and job by job. It was amazing. He died 2 years later. Passed away 2 years ago. He was 104 years, something like that. And then in Koye, I take the first contact, the first woman, Kurdish woman writers, Yafa bin Menashe. It was, I speak with her. She was speaking Kurdish so much goodly. So we had planning to I come to Israel to meet her. Unfortunately, because my passport, I had European resident card, I couldn't have travel with my Iraqi passport. I would wait when I had a French passport, she was passed away. So I go to visit her another way because she did a great job. She translated a lot of Kurdish beautiful songs to Hebrew language. So this all works, and she published a book. Now it's even translated in Kurdistan. The second part, Jewish life in Kurdistan, in Kurdish, and she can find it even in English and Hebrew. This is the hand of her husband, Mordechai, reading for me all this beautiful work. And the second year, because I visited Israel a few times to finish it, it was in the first, just a question. But the question, it was opening a lot of doors for me, even for myself, to understand who was them, what would happen. So later on, in the middle of the transmission, a young boy who loved the music, who find himself like a Kurdish, and of course, he introduced me for his teacher, Yussi Zakin, originally from Zakho, 88 years old. He was dancer and he speaks Kurdish perfectly. The Kurmanji, of course, because we are the Kurdish, we have the two dialects, Kurmanji and Sorani. And of course, and I meet few all these years and other peoples. Mushe Asken is from Erbil, Koye, and there's the two daughters here. His wife, she was from Erbil, and he speaks so much goodly the Sorani. This old man my third time, because I live in Israel, he's a friend of Mordechai. He was calling me every day. Every day he was just speaking with me in Kurdish when he take my number. I told him last day, why you call me every day? He told me, I am in the hospital. I don't know I will die or not. So I want to just speak in Kurdish with you. If you accept that, I say, okay. I accept speak with him, and I returned back for France, and I couldn't go see him. And after my project had been take attention from the University of Tel Aviv, I didn't share it. So he accepted my projects because it was, he told me, you are not academician, but no one will think about it with you. Even my student, I say, I'm sorry, it was just a reflection from me. So I want to end it. It's take me times and take me, of course, a lot of energy to find a real witness to constitute this memory again, to give it a beautiful, or tell the people the truth, what happened before they go. And the more important in this part of research, when I found the passport collective of Mordechai, it was writing Royaume d'Irak, Iraq, and down it was something, stamps, so much important stamps. One of them, it was, it's forbidden for him to return back to Iraq. In Arabic, it was لا يسمح له بالعودة إلى العراق. But the more important thing I found in this passport, it was another stamp. It was just writing in Arabic, شُهِدَ أثناء المغادرة. We saw him when he left. My goodness, it's mean, what's the trauma they put it inside for the government in this period, in this times. Of course, in my job, in this project, Duigu and Bahar, they accepted to participate with it. And I had another reflections more in this project. It was a new cards and maps, building another maps again. When this Kurdish, they come in Israel, when they come to, this is a museum, Beit Yusuf. It's a Kurdish, small Kurdish museum, built by individually by the peoples, who the people, they put all the stuffs, they bring it with them from Kurdistan. So in my project, it's like we build another maps. I give it all the information for Philippe Rikavik. It's his cartograph. He's named by name of Rika. And he will make for us a card from the displaced people, how they displaced from Kurdistan, how they come to Israel. We know it was Erbil and any places to Baghdad. They take for them the nationality of Iraqi, and they take a planes. It was from the United States and going where Cyprus, Israel. And from them, they will be put them in Ma'bara, we say, transit places for years until they dispatch it. So, and the more interesting, how they did it by which language, if they respected the dialects between the peoples, because they are coming from the north, who they speak the Badini, and who they are speak the Sorani, and the Kurdish of Iran, they speak the Sorani. It was so much interesting to reveal that again. I visit them all. I think so. I visited Israel for 5 times, but the first time it was so much hard. When you enter to Israel with you are Iraqi, they ask me questions for 7 hours. But it was so much interesting. They have a right to ask me, but what I say it for them, just the questions, I attack them. I say, I should take you in the court because I lose a witness because the bureaucratic stuff. Person, I should meet him. And today she said to me, Bahar, it's not the time to speak about that. Maybe, unfortunately, not a good time to say no. It will be shame for us, for a lot of people, because we lose a witness. We lose a people. They could give us more beautiful memories and the right stories. And we can live all together in peace, like in this cemetery. It's a Muslim and Christian and Jewish cemetery in our region. In the fact, this is when we hope my projects about it. It will be finished by a lot of stuffs, a book, publications, maybe exhibitions, performance, musical performance, and I think this is also the more important things. I publish it this in Kurdish language to transmit it in Kurdistan for the new generations. Thank you so much. I'm sorry if I speak a lot.
Not at all. Thank you, Moed. That was wonderful. It's lovely to bring in the human side after also wonderful presentations from our colleagues. Bahar, your overview. Duygu, the historical context, and Mesut, thank you for your fascinating observations, political, sociological, and from the project. It's a wonderful, fascinating, rich project. We're very grateful to you for the presentations and for sharing that with us. Participants online, if you have a question, do please type it. We have one come in so far, but please don't be shy, put another one out there. I see we have a great group of attendees on this seminar. So please let us know. Also, Bahar has put in the chat more information on the project, the CBRL link and journal article. Congratulations on that. That looks fascinating also. So we'll start with a question from Nian Ibrahim. As we know, the Jewish community was quite affluent and they played a great role in the socioeconomic conditions of the Kurdish cities. Wanting to ask about the impact of the evacuated neighborhoods on social and economic conditions. Who would like to take that?
I think I can take that.
Thank you.
Yeah. From what we have learned through our research is that it's kind of like a misconception that all Jews, wherever they live, are very affluent. In the case of Kurdistan, of course, there were some more affluent merchants, for instance, who were involved in bringing clothes from India and selling it throughout the Middle East. But in most of the cases, these people lived in very faraway villages and they worked the land and they weren't that affluent. But, you know, they had their houses and they had their belongings. So eventually, I think if you look at the bigger picture, as in the case of many nation-building state process in the Middle East, we are talking about a transfer of wealth, which basically transfer of wealth that we see in the case of Turkey, for instance, with the varlık vergisi and similar things, the capital tax in Turkey. So we are talking about the transfer of wealth from non-Muslim minorities to the Muslim majority. So in the long run, I think it has helped the local communities. They settled people there. They had everything built and ready, all the infrastructure. So in general, I believe it helped because these were also for free because the Jews, when they were forced to leave, when they were expelled, they were not allowed to sell their belongings. So everything was confiscated.
Just could I just more informations in I didn't mention it in this time in this period in Iraq. I speak about in Kurdistan, Iraq. They could some of Jewish people take the money outside, but the money outside, how is going outside from Iraq? It was going first for the Iran and Iran to London and London only, and almost the Jewish people, of course, what they had to be confiscated by the government, landed, or sometimes they let it for a Kurdish people. It's like a free, like honors, take it. I cannot take it with myself, but of course they had more we say in economic in the country. We know it in Iraq, like a country. It was built like 1950-21, and almost of the rich of Jewish. They was the leader or the first prime minister. It was Jewish in Iraq, of course, but usually the people they had be affected by the depart of the Jewish people, not because the money, not because about the relation they had it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In the absence of other questions coming in yet, please do type a question. I have a question which I will abuse the chair and ask of Mesut. It was very interesting when you mentioned about the community in Israel, you finding right-wing ideology was strong, perhaps in contrast to other people of Kurdish background, certainly from your part of the world. I wonder if you could expand on that a little. Were you able to investigate that further? Do you have any idea why? And is it comparable to any other communities in Israel? I'm thinking also of Arab communities from Iraq who've ended up there, and if there's any distinction, if you have any other observations, that would be very, very interesting. Thank you.
The answer, I think I should start with one day. It was 2014. I was with Duygu in Jaffa, in Tel Aviv, and I talking with my guests, and I hear a man he talking on the phone, and the other side they didn't understand him, and he say, "Are you Kurdish?" At that point I couldn't tell what I feel. I said, Duygu, did I hear right? She said, yes. I couldn't say. I said, please openly say me what's going on in Israel and what did he say. And Duygu, can you say that sentence when you use it in Hebrew?
Yeah, it is kind of like a stereotype in Hebrew. When you think that someone is a bit like slower to understand, you would say like Mata Kurdi, what are you, Kurdish? As if someone is slow to. It's kind of like a stereotype that has survived. When you ask the Kurdish people, they would argue that it's much less. But I would say personally that it still exists.
Yeah, and dear Robert, that when I start to think about that right-wing stuff, and it took me that point, and I understand, and even Bahar, Moayed, and Duygu, they pointing that they're speaking Neo-Aramic, Kurdish, and Arabic language. And when they came to Israel, they didn't understand anything about lingua franca in Israel. And it was newborn country, and they start to build a new education language and system. And the Kurdish community, mostly they are living in rural area, and they are not city people. They are mostly nomads, and they are living in the villages. Even they are Christian, Jewish, or Muslim, doesn't matter for them. They are living in that part of countries, whatever they are living. And in my opinion, when they came, they didn't understand anything from the officers, about anything about what's going on in formal world of Israel. They just try to be a part of this newborn country, and they handle it as much as they can. We have some similar, but politically it's not correct, but similar situation in Turkey. We have paramilitary forces in southeast of Turkey. We call them Korucu. They are Kurdish, but they are paid by government, and they are fight against Kurdish fighters. When you see battle between that paid Kurdish people and the Kurdish fighters, it's more dramatic than Turkish fighters. They are attacking in whole whatever they have, because they want to be a part of Turkey, and they want to be accepted. In my opinion, in Israel, that story is back to that one. They want to be a real part of that one. And even both of you, my dear friends, Bahar, because you're speaking with him in English with Yehuda ben Yosef, and in Hebrew also Duygu with him. When he represent his community, his his population in Israel, they said, Kurdish people are strong. We fight a lot for freedom of Israel. We are so important for that country. Still, it was exist in some were in his heart and brain. I think it's about that, dear Robert.
Thank you very much.
Robert, just to complete it, what he said, Masood, the transmission of the language is one of my questions. How they did it, it should have happened, actually. Yes, it happened in Israel. Yussi Zakin and 2 or 3 of my witnesses, they could transmit the Kurdish language. Of course, when they come, it was forbidden. It was shame to speak in Kurdish. Just the only stuff they can do, they're eating Kurdish at house. And the identity be similar like Egypt peoples, they are not educated, coming from the mountains, and they have deformations of them names, the problems. And just to finish it, how you can transmit the language in the new country like Israel? This is the interesting questions. So I ask, you see, your first child, you say, no, my first wife, she was Ashkenaz. So she didn't, I could not translate it. But my second wife, she was a Kurdish like me. So we was speaking Kurdish, talking Kurdish, we could translate the language. And of course, I find a new generation in Kurdistan, in Israel, they name it the Jewish people who they traveled the second part. Because all the Jews, they didn't go from Iraq. We have the second part, they go in 1991, after the zone of Kurdistan, and they was be free. These new generations, they born in Kurdistan, they speak so much well, and they are in, how we say, they are for me the new forces with the old to make keeping the language alive.
Thank you, Moed. That's very helpful. We now have quite a few questions rolling in. We don't have much time left. So what I propose to do is I will just briefly summarize the questions or points. I'll do them all at once. And then the 4 of you pick and choose anything you wish to respond to in the time we have left, and be very brief in your comments. So thank you, Rojin Sherwan, for your questions about Mizrahi Jews, the label. How does this play in Israeli society in the treatment of Kurdistani Jews? Does it affect perceptions of their connection to Israel, being Mizrahi as opposed to Ashkenazi, and perhaps being treated as more inferior? Emil Cohen, thank you for your question. Enjoyed reading about Kurdistan in Mount Father's Paradise by Ariel Sabar, but we read a lot of Jewish people existing in Kurdistan right now. I don't know if that's true or not. Meral, thank you for your question. Is there any connection between Sephardics in Turkey and the Jews in Iraq? And Mina, thank you. Personally went to Israel and still felt there was racial bias there for being Kurdish. This being the case, how come Kurds there embrace that community so much? Touches on the last point, I think, as well. And last question, thank you, from Nazi Rauf. My question is for Bahar and her response, in response to her comment about the memory facet of the project. Can you elaborate on any findings on how memory passes from generations and what mediators play a significant role in this passing of memory identity? Bahar, why don't we start with you? That's a direct question to you, and then let the others answer anything they wish.
Thank you so much. I'll just refer to a few points about other questions as well. Thank you so much for staying with us, and we are really happy that so many people are interested in these topics, to be honest. So about the Mizrahi identity, Duygu and I conducted a historical research about this topic, and we combined it with the data that we gathered from interviews. So it is very clear that the first generation who arrived to Israel suffered from discrimination, and but it did not push them to be isolated from the rest of the community. Rather than isolation, they chose to integrate themselves and assimilate themselves as much as they could. And what we have noticed in most of the interviews was that they made a deliberate effort to leave their previous identities behind, to fit in, to be part of the newly established Israeli society. And during our interviews, for example, many of our interviewees were happy that that their children were serving in the in law enforcement, etc. So they were so proud that they were the ones who built Israel, literally, you know, by contributing to the construction business, etc. So we had the feeling that they had to show like a clear commitment to the Israeli project, and they had to justify their presence there by doing more than others, perhaps, because they were kind of excluded from the at least intellectual circles for a long time. But we could also observe that with the forthcoming generations, these kind of hierarchies kind of disappeared, although some mentioned that it still exists. So there was one question about how come Kurds embrace this feeling so much. So I would go back to the first project. So when I started, you know, having trouble with the semantics when I first started the project. Shall I call them Kurdish Jews or Kurdistani Jews or Jewish Kurds? You know, I was worried about my choice of words because, you know, each of them means something different in a way. And then I started paying attention to how they were defining themselves, and I was using a translator at this time. This was before I met Duygu, and they were, for example, calling themselves as Kurdish. They were proud to be Kurdish. I visited Kurdish organizations in Jerusalem and the museums in Tel Aviv and the surroundings, etc. And they were referring to themselves as Kurds when we were talking about their community in Israel. But then when we talked about their experience in Kurdistan, they were talking about, oh, the Kurds did this to us, you know, the Kurds were really nice to us. So suddenly they had a different identity. They were Jews in Kurdistan. So I thought, following a few scholars before us, we wanted to focus on Kurdistani Jews. So they embrace their Israeli identity because they see themselves as Jewish first, in my opinion. So my colleagues might agree or disagree with me, and they just want to fit in. And it was very different because I was, you know, I'm used to working on memory and cultural trauma and how different generations inherit cultural traumas. And for me, the Kurdistani Jewish community in Israel was really different from what I'm used to seeing. You know, I worked on Anfal, Halabja, and how these kind of traumas are passed to different generations, or Kurds who are forcefully displaced from Turkey. I saw that they turned cultural trauma into an asset even because they felt like they came home. So in their stories, it was like they left their home in Kurdistan to come home. It was a promised land for them, and maybe they weren't devoted Zionists in the beginning, but now they were. And so I could totally see the feeling of feeling secure in a home. That's why I even refrain nowadays to call them even as a diaspora, because these people feel like home. So when we say diaspora, we kind of separate them from their own lived experiences in a way. So in terms of memory, just a few words. I could see that the second and third generation, they were proud of their parents' identity. But as Moayed mentioned, many Kurdistani Jews also married people with different backgrounds, and, you know, suddenly the Kurdistani identity might lose its importance for the other generations because they're Israelis first. But they cherished culinary traditions or music, you know, going to festivals. They treated the culture as their parents' legacy to them in a way. But we also met some people, like we were talking about Liron, the folk dance teacher. There are also second and third generation young people who want to re-embrace Kurdish identity, especially I think after ISIS and the heightened image of Kurds in around that time, you know, YPG, etc. I think it really put Kurds on the scene again, and many young people started showing interest in Kurdish identity. Some second and third generation might show interest again, but they really cherish their parents' history. But they managed to somehow believe in this melting pot idea in Israel, and although the previous identity might stay there, it's not a hurdle in front of their assimilation to Israel. Thank you.
Thank you, Bahar. Dugu, would you like to go next with any thoughts, comments?
I would like to start with Richard's question. Has the project led to reflections about cultural odysseys of other religious minorities from Kurdistan? I want to say that during our interviews, we have come across some testimonies that were very interesting about these intercommunity relations with the Jewish community. So one of the things that I personally thought about, like for instance, the Armenians that were living there, or the Assyrians that were living there, that it is a very interesting topic to be looked into because there is something there. But if you, Richard, ask me if we have done it yet, unfortunately not, because we didn't have the time, but we have heard some stories. Secondly, to Mina, that you felt racial bias for being Kurdish. I will leave this to Mesut very quickly because he has, I think, what to say. To Meral, if there's any connection between the Sephardis in Turkey and Jews in Iraq, no. They come from two different geographical places, one from Spain and Portugal, and the other is from Kurdistan. And also in Israel, they form two distinct groups. Like if you go into the, they are called the, Turkish immigrants, and the rest is called or either Iraqi or Kurdish. So they also culturally are very distinct from one another. About Kurds, Kurdistan, about Jewish people in Kurdistan, I know that there are only a handful of people left. There isn't a big Jewish community, unfortunately, anywhere in the Middle East, in any of these countries. So I don't know, Emil, what you have heard, but I don't think it is true.
It's about the existence of the Jewish people in Kurdistan. I'm in a relation with the representative officially.
Yeah, but I think it's very limited. It's not like
yeah,
many people.
he tell me how much, because the question is the security. Because the security they cannot say, but it's not allowed.
Yes. And Mesut, could you please answer to, if we have time, Mina's question about how you felt perhaps in Israel as a Kurd?
If it's addressing me as a Kurdish people, I every time I say that, I never can feel freely to say I am Kurdish more than Israel in the world. I never feel that one before. And also I feel with my Kurdistani Jewish friend also, I feel that they are really deeply from their heart, they can freely say I am Kurdish or from Kurdistan or I'm Kurdistani. Being a Kurdish in Israel, for me, it's one of the most safest place to, I can say that. Even here in France, I'm living in Paris, I couldn't be a part of that identity here, because here I am just a foreign, I am just a blackhead, come from Middle East, that's all. But in Israel, I can identify myself clearly, so openly as a Kurdish from Kurdistani Turkey, or North Kurdistan or southeast of Turkey, but I'm Kurdish. And when I talking with people in Israel, and when I say I'm from Kurdistan, and I feel that they never know the Kurdistan is never exist in the history. They know Kurdistan is one of the Middle Eastern country, and it is exist, and which is touching my heart. I feel so good. But even for me, as a growing in Muslim culture, Kurdish, or for my friends or brothers, sisters, as a Kurdistani Jewish, it's so comfortable to say I'm Kurdish in Israel. I like that.
I just want to say something. In the past, when I first time go to Israel, my first time, it was so much in 2019 before the COVID. I was in Jerusalem, so I was researching my first Kurdish restaurant. So I asked a policeman, "Hello, excuse me, could you know a Kurdish restaurant?" He told me, "Why?" I said, "I'm Kurdish." He said, "Okay, take this way, this way." And after he saw me, I will be, don't find my way. He said, "Okay, stop, come inside the car." He take me in the car and go inside. I will take you there. And I say, so to another policeman, they come, he say, to arrested a terrorist. He say, no, he's a Kurdish. I will take him for his restaurant. He left his place. He take me until in 20 minutes, until he take me for the first Kurdish restaurant I go. I say, never saw that, even in Europe, since 13 years I'm living in Europe. A policeman, he left his job to take me for a place. Then I know the Kurdish idea is something so much. How is he respectable by the Jewish people? Because we are something we fight for, some say one only things, our nations and our language. So I think it's make it, how we say, lines between the two nations. They know we are not dangerous. Even they take with me 6 hours, ask me questions, and after it's normal. Like I said, my friend Yusi, one of my friends, I was his guest first time. He told me, "I'm sorry, when you arrive, they will ask you questions, little bit bother you." I say, Yusi, listen to me. The Kurdistan, Israel and Kurdistan same each other, because we have the people around us, just they want to determine us. So I hope the person who will ask me questions, take his time with me. But it was every time when I enter in this country, so much beautiful. The people there are good, especially. And this right now, to be honest, they told me, even my friend, you can speak Arabic, never speak it. Speak Kurdish, but don't speak Arabic. Because the Kurdish people, they are more loved by the people than the Arabic people. So it's sad, at the same time, we should be human, we stay same, we all love each other. But I think the situation is being changed now, since like before they use it against the Kurdish, you are damn it like a Kurdish, because I think the nations, Kurdish nations, is starting to moving for another levels, more respectable than before.
Thank you, Moed. And thank you, Dugu, for answering Mina's request for a reading list, which may be of interest to others as well who have joined this seminar. I would have thought your journal article might not be a bad place to start too, and there'll be references in that from the link you gave. But thank you very much for offering to help on this fascinating subject. Bahar, would you like to say anything else before we close? I know we're out of time.
Thank you so much. I was just going to say we also have a short reading list at the exhibition page. And then if you want to learn more about our fieldwork, we also have a short video about how we conducted our fieldwork. I think that's one of the most popular sites on our website. And you can also see more photos taken by Moayed as well. So thank you so much for these wonderful questions. And if you want to get in touch with us about our research, you will find our emails easily, and you can always get in touch with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all our participants out there who joined online today. We're very grateful that you took part. Thank you for your wonderful questions. And thank you to our marvelous panelists. Thank you, Bahar, Moed, Mesut, and Dugu. It was lovely to see you all. Thank you so much for sharing your project and research. We look forward to seeing you all again soon.